Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast from Sustainable Business Network Detroit. Our goal is to bring you Detroit stakeholders, innovators, and change makers with a sustainable business mission. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to wherever you get your podcast and leave us a review. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and head on over to our website, sbndetroit.net. Now, let's get to our conversation on sustainability. So I am just absolutely thrilled that I get to spend some time today with Pashon, who is the founder of detroitdirt. And we were talking a little bit before we went live about how absolutely excited I am about her work and how thrilling it is to be able to learn more about what her sources of inspiration were and what her goals are and how she's going to change the world. So Pashon, could you just start out by introducing yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and your journey.
Sure. So my name is Pashon Murray, and I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was born and raised there. But I think the significant thing about being a Michigander is the love that I've always had for Detroit, although my family is in Muskegon, Grand Rapids, and here. But I grew up going to the landfills with my dad here and there to make a few dollars growing up to buy things that I wanted because he was an entrepreneur and had contracts with the city and the county. So having that experience and understanding the landfill at a young age, it didn't make sense to me then. I had no idea spiritually that I would be combating those issues as an adult or business owner. But also our family had a farm in Mississippi, and watching my grandfather become one with nature. And it was a extremely profound and just impactful experience as a child, where you come from the city, but then you go into this world of nature and being out on a farm, and the fascination of knowing like, oh, this is where my food comes from, and being able to understand that. But along the way, Grand Rapids was investing hundreds of millions of dollars. When I graduated undergrad, I finished up in undergrad like 2000, 2001, but I moved back to Grand Rapids. They were investing hundreds of millions of dollars in like 2003, 2004 with building a more efficient city. So sustainability became a focus and on my radar. And it was just phenomenal because I was like, oh, this is going to like shift the culture, the way we think, the way that we operate in our everyday lives. And so that was a pivotal moment. But I had this company called Waste Trends. That was the first company that I had. And essentially, I was responsible in one of the contracts, a green building lead project. And that opened up my world to, the waste stream. And I thought, waste is not really waste. And so that particular moment of my life, I knew that I was destined, like this was more of a calling. This wasn't really about, a career per se. This was really about fixing and creating solutions and strategies to build with Mother Earth, to build with her and with the ecosystem and not against her. And so Waste Trends started in Grand Rapids, and I ran that company for a couple years. That was the bridge to detroitdirt, because I knew I didn't want to stay at home in Grand Rapids, that I really wanted to make more of an impact here in Detroit, because for me as a child and growing up, visiting Detroit and Chicago, Detroit was to me, the mecca of manufacturing. You had all this innovation and ingenuity and engineers. And I thought, if I'm going to stay in Michigan and be close to my family, I wanted to, at least move here. So, and be a part of the change of Detroit. But what was fascinating is, at that time, the urban farming, there was whispers about urban farming. The automotive community hadn't yet faced bankruptcy yet, but it was all these possibilities. To me, it was the opportunities. And I just knew that, okay, some of the work that I had accomplished in Grand Rapids, I would love to be able to do the same thing in Detroit. And so there was a lot of, for me, I felt like the energy here, it was like I was being pulled to Detroit. And, I also had opportunities to lobby, and I knew that going to DC with Repower America and National Wildlife and other organizations and nonprofits that were pushing for renewables at the time, I knew I needed to be more boots on the ground and more of a grassroots efforts, instead of lending a helping hand to, Capitol Hill. I just felt like if you could actually put your words into action and be a part of a movement, and influence it, that had more of an impact on the community than lobbying did. And so I worked with some community colleges and universities at the time, but Detroit Dirt was like the spirit, it was like a spirit rising up in you to, one, landfills, dealing with food waste, but then bringing this topic as an attention, bringing attention to an urgent epidemic that was like low-hanging fruit. So that has a lot to do with how Detroit Dirt as an idea, getting the automotive community and others to see that food waste was an issue, because it's just something that most people don't think about. They don't think about soil and they don't really think about food waste or landfills. So it's been a fun journey, tying all those, those nodes to, end users and networks. And it's been very interesting, but to say the least, Detroit Dirt, the goal was to just influence and change the carbon footprint, but at the same time, get people to socially, economically, and environmentally think about change in a way that was non-traditional, but getting them to see the benefits of healthy soil, getting them to see that we don't need to be producing methane and emitting, CO2, we need to be reducing it, but at the same time, creating byproducts that people can actually utilize, that was cleaner source. So, that's a longer answer, I'm sure, than you anticipated, but I always give people a little bit of background about who I am, so they can make the connections, like, oh, she went to the landfills, farm, lobbying, consulting. I just try to make things make sense and paint pictures for people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of that. And, it fits really nicely into what we're trying to do with the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. And I'm really proud. I'm Terry Barclay. I'm the president and CEO of Inforum. And I'm really proud to be part of the team of organizations that's creating the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. Inforum, we have so much to talk about, Pashon, because Inforum is the largest network for women in business, for professional women in the state, with over 5,000 members. And so many of our members are working to make their companies and their organizations more sustainable. But we believe that at Inforum anyway, that the environments that elevate and celebrate women and their accomplishments, that are inclusive, are a key part, that kind of thinking of creating the cultures and the environments where all of your best talent can be at the table, and have a vital role. We know that that contributes to the long-term economic success of any business,
Sure.
when they have all talent at the table. And what we're trying to do through Sustainable Business Network of Detroit is increase the visibility and elevate the stories of the people who are doing this work, and the organizations and the companies that are doing great things. And our vision is really about having Detroit become known as a hub for sustainable business enterprise. So our work is very much aligned to some of the things you talked about, because we know that we need to create the conditions and the platform for companies, the global giants that are the auto companies that you mentioned, and others who are such a vital part of the economy of our region, to come together with local and place-based businesses, and the kind of innovation that can spark is just invaluable, and is such an important part of the future for all of us. But I just have so many questions for you. So, and you may have questions for me too. But what are some? Do you have any? What are some of the key things that you think businesses? What role can business play?
Yeah.
What more can business do? What are some best practice examples out there that you found to be inspirational, that you just wish we could scale, or that we could have more of?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting how you look at like this network distribution, right? Of how, like, you're a part of a network, and how, you have the opportunity to bring focus of certain topics. And I'm so inspired by the fact that technology, the world of tech, is starting to integrate with agriculture, because that's what we need to accelerate this process, is taking innovation as well as old practices, and creating and innovating, and building from that. But when you look at certain industries that were traditional industries that normally did not think about, it was more so of, oh, we're farmers, or, oh, we're in Silicon Valley, we have, our day-to-day jobs and these corporations. But I think private companies or corporations have an opportunity to impact, because their brands are so influential, and people already invest in their companies and their brands. They have a unique opportunity to kind of take on issues in a more accelerated fashion, instead of, waiting on the federal government or municipalities to take on these issues. And I think, what I've been most inspired by is the fact of those who just said, we're going to do it, we're going to try it, we're going to create these pilot programs, and we're going to work with small businesses, because the local economy, I always believe that the local economies impact the global economies. And so when you have stakeholders and communities that are willing to come together to align with one another, that can shift and impact, because all of our networks, if you're in a network, I'm in a network, and we are in a shared network as well, it really gives the community, from education to municipalities and others, to sit back and watch and see the progress that's being made. And so I'm always fascinated by those who are willing to just act on it and say, sustainability, we need to take this on as corporate social responsibility. So let's figure it out. But when you collaborate and hold hands with others, I just think that's phenomenal, because it's like in the automotive community, Ford, GM, and Chrysler and all their suppliers, they kind of come together and address the topic collaboratively. And to me, that is more, it's invaluable, just to say it's invaluable to come together.
So I'm really curious about whether you have any examples to share. I know that um, when I was preparing to meet you and talk with you, I was looking, you talked about some things you've done with GM and Blue Cross Blue Shield and the Detroit Zoo and food waste and the breweries. I mean, what are some of the specifics so that we can get to getting an image in our heads of what's possible?
Sure. That's a great question. So two examples. I knew that if I could get buy-in, at least from a major corporation that had a brand that people were, a known brand that was impactful globally and locally. That was strategic and calculated. I said, I need someone who can impact the community locally, but they're impacting globally. So General Motors, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then the Detroit Zoo, to me, the zoo represents community because there's so many, from children to programs, education programs. And so having that manure, and manure is, there's an issue, people don't think about this, but manure management is an issue globally as well, just like food waste is. And so I thought, if I could approach a corporation and get them to at least address this issue with me around food waste, and then divert it from General Motors, but this Detroit Dirt was only a few miles, like 3 to 4 miles away from the headquarters. One, we could calculate and create data based off of the diversion. Two, we could go to the zoo and get them to participate in the program, and then show how two impactful organizations or corporations are impacting the community, but they decided to work with me to create a byproduct, which was composting. And that's just on the surface to give people an idea of the mileage, the data, the impact, and so the economics of it is, hey, we're not sending this to the landfill. We are actually processing and making a product. So that was the whole goal of that, is to, and I look at Detroit Dirt, it was a lab for the first 10, 12 years. That I really didn't look at it as a, and I know people think of it as a corporation, but there's the Detroit Dirt Foundation and there's Detroit Dirt LLC, the for-profit, but it really was about creating a lab and collaboration. Yeah.
So to be specific, you collected manure from the zoo and you brought it to your site and you made compost that then was distributed back out.
Yep. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. Food waste from General Motors headquarters, because they have probably 26 to 30 restaurants. I lost count at their headquarters. And then the zoo produces, so much manure every month. And the goal was to just process two, byproducts, actually those feedstocks, which you see, biomass is like all of this waste as a whole, right? You look at fuel, you look at feedstocks, what biomass really is. We just wanted to take a piece of that puzzle and uplift it, which was food waste, manure, and make a product, but get to, like I said, major impactful brands involved in the process. Yeah.
So help us understand what a low carbon economy is.
Yeah. And it's, I love it that I see that globally, because for the last 10 years, we've been pushing for a low carbon economy. And so when, from a corporation standpoint or from the federal government, when it comes to policy, they're looking at low carbon, right? So when you think about what we're emitting, I'm just going to use this as an example. Food waste is such a potent methane gas, and it escapes when it's not processed properly. So those gases that escape and impact, pollution, the biosphere, the atmosphere, you name it. What is going on today is this low carbon economy is about investing in carbon removal and creating practices, whether that is, within a corporation or in academia, whoever you are. The goal is to push policy, creating actionable processes that will reduce the CO2, right? And head in a direction where we can have more of a zero waste or net zero. Because I think that because carbon or carbon dioxide is something that most people don't really think about, the low carbon economy is just saying, let's tackle that issue and minimize it in the best way that we possibly can, whoever we are. Whether we're food producers, logistics companies, transportation, let's figure out how to get more efficient cars out there. Let's figure out how to capture and process waste better. So this whole notion or idea around low carbon is reducing CO2. It's as simple as that. It's like, let's reduce CO2, whoever we are. And so when you start looking at carbon credits and carbon markets, it's just a way to get people to get engaged in investing in the actions of reducing CO2. Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm really curious about, I'd love to know what your experience is about this, is how do you motivate companies? How do you motivate companies and the people who run them to care about this? I mean, here we are, war, chip shortages, supply chain disruptions, a pandemic, there's a lot of things to worry about. And how do you move this up on people's and companies' priority list? And how do you do that differently? I mean, in some ways, I think it's more understandable why large companies care about this. In part, it's because their investors care about it, right? And so there's the capital markets are bringing pressure to bear, for companies to be more transparent about their strategies and accountable, reporting on those strategies. But how do you, that still requires, there's a lot to worry about in running a big company. So it still requires that this be a priority. And how does that differ from a local restaurant or a local company that doesn't have the internal infrastructure, may not have the same kind of the same set of incentives for moving to action about this? I'm really curious about what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, so I take an approach about researching corporations to see actually what is their like social or corporate responsibility. What are they doing in the community? And so when I walk through the door, I'm already in my mind understanding what they're committed to. And so those who have made a commitment to sustainability, obviously it's easier to go in and inspire them because they see the importance of it. But those who don't have more that connection or of understanding truly what sustainability is, my goal is to go in and explain to them, like, if you have children, this is about creating a world for them and creating, this bridge that they can walk across because they're going to be the leaders. I also like to talk to them about economics, because most corporations, if they're saving money or making money, or generating revenue, that is what their intent is. You can see that the interest is there. And so my approach, it just depends on who the corporation is, but for the most part, I'm there to paint a picture for them and get them to understand how they can play a role in it. But we can take incremental steps. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to commit $5 million because you have a $20 million budget for community and branding and marketing around social and environmental justice. I'm here to help you understand that we can walk and we can build together and make a difference, even if it's one project and then it turns into, 2 projects, so we can scale the change. We don't have to, some people have the budgets to do 10 things within a year, others don't. But my goal is to get them to see how important the environment is, but also there's such great innovation and ingenuity around being able to make the difference. And so with General Motors and Blue Cross, and even as a consultant, because that is actually where I'm truly able to impact and influence, is I'll get pulled into a group of conversation with executives, whether it's in pharmaceuticals or tech, and we'll talk about what are their, it's like, what is your timeline? How do you want to make change? You know, let's put together this mission for you around change. And guess what? If we decide to do that, there's some people in your community right here around you that will benefit from that. So the inspiration is to get them to understand what sustainability is, and taking something that's relatable within climate change, because it's such a complex conversation for a lot of people. I try to bring it down a couple of notches and get them to see something as simple as waste reduction, or donating to a farm or an organization that's actually, you know, creating the change as well. But giving them just options and inspiring them to think about time and commitments and dedication is something that you don't have a deadline on. It's something that you work on every day as well. So that, you know, for me, I dwell in that space because that's how one corporation tells another about the work that I'm doing. Because it's like, oh, we didn't really think about, you know, just taking food waste from our cafeterias or doing an audit, you know, around waste reduction, you know. So I give them ideas on how they can actually make the change. Yeah. Because I don't want to burden, you don't want to give people too much of a homework assignment where it feels like there's this disdain and they're loathing the whole idea of creating, you know what I mean? Like, you want to make it fun and exciting for them and get them to be inspired to participate, you know?
Yeah, you really answered a couple of my I mean, you know, one of my real questions is how do you advise people about where to start? And have you seen a trend or a pattern, I guess, in what seems to be the easiest places for companies to start? You know, what rises to the top as a priority or a place?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So the trend that I'm seeing now is, because all of us who are in this network of addressing food waste globally, we're starting to see that, you know, companies that traditionally didn't think anything about food waste is starting to, so I call it the low hanging fruit. You start seeing trends around low hanging fruit. It's like, oh, some of our marketing and branding dollars actually can, we can donate money to organizations in our community that are actually combating climate change. So I saw like a shift with that as well. In the academia world, I began to see so many programs around curriculums and career focused degree programs that, you know, just emerged over the years. But with corporations, I think the dynamic is when they can look at, okay, if we're a service company, or whether we distribute, if we have these tangible assets that are actually valuable, and we can actually redirect them or get certain materials, raw materials, in the hands of those that actually need it, especially with food distributors and manufacturers. The reason why the supply chain began to develop these, and we realized the inefficiencies of supply chains, is no one really was thinking about a crisis or a pandemic. And so when it happened, it was like, oh, wow, what should we be doing about this situation? And it revealed the inefficiencies. Well, if you haven't created automation or integrated tech in like 20 years, if you've been doing the same, you know, process because you didn't have any disruptions, why would you? And so now I'm seeing the trend of how do we innovate? How do we innovate with sustainability? Because sustainability is not a quick return in ROI. You're not going to get a quick return in the first 2 or 3 years, but long term, it's going to save our company money, or it's going to help us generate revenue. So I've seen the innovation, those who have shifted towards commitments, and it's just phenomenal because the UN at the end of last year, they awarded me and 3 others as food heroes with the FAO. And what was so great?
Congratulations.
Thank you. All 4 of us were working in different areas of food waste, and whether it was advocacy or companies. But what it was showing is if you have these 17 sustainability development goals, I always kind of give people like, listen, there's 17 goals. If you address 1 or 2, and that's what's going on with most corporations around the country. They're saying, we're going to be committed to 12, or we're going to be committed to 7. And you see these commitments just happening. People are building environmental portfolios, and it's happening like every day. We're reading in the Bloomberg. I mean, I read it every day, 2-3 times a day. And it's just like, wow, this company made a commitment. This company made, so it's like that trend is just beautiful, because now we can see the potential of the markets that are going to be built around the environment, which is what all of us really behind the scenes we're trying to do. We don't walk into corporations to say, hey, we need you to help us develop this market. We're saying we're all going to work on different issues and then bring them together. So in the future, there's the biochar market or the composting, because these are commodities when you look at agriculture. You have to be savvy about how you approach issues. And so, as you can see, I'm very excited about and passionate about this, but it's just exciting to see all the commitments that are happening left and right. And I think the pandemic had something to do with it, but I also think that people are realizing that sustainability addresses a multitude of issues. Climate change and climate resiliency addresses so many issues. And when you have the right people making the decisions to address these issues, it's better off for not just the world as a whole, but it's also getting corporations and households to start thinking about what they need to be doing. So, the global force of that is just invaluable.
So to be a devil's advocate for just a minute, I think that how real and how sticky do you think these commitments that are springing up are? I know that certainly as you read the business press, there's skepticism about how deep and long-term the commitment's going to be. What are you seeing? I mean, it sounds like you've worked with some companies who've made real change, and that you're optimistic that that's the case. So what's your view of that?
So on the corporate side, people talk about greenwashing, but I think those who we can actually pinpoint or associate them with what they're committed to and holding them accountable is a lot different than just reading about someone and saying, oh, they're committed to reducing 50,000 tons this year of food waste or recycling plastics. Now we can hold corporations accountable if they make these announcements and commitments. We can actually go to them and say, show us your data, show us your evaluations or these assessments that you're saying that you're associated with. Because what I'm seeing, which is awesome, which is emerging, is with regulatory and certain levels of commitments around sustainability. Now it's like you can't just get with a lot of companies, they can't just get certified, and say that, oh, we're certified or we have this certificate. That you have to really prove. And I think that that's what we need to do in the future, is make sure that we're holding people accountable. And I don't think you're being a devil's advocate at all. I think you're saying, if you're going to make an announcement or a commitment, you should be held accountable. But from the government standpoint, for as far as policy, this honestly, in the last year, I testified in front of the U.S. Senate in February, and there was 4 of us witnesses, and we were all talking about innovation. And there was 3 legislative draft bills, which showed that 1, they're ready to change the laws, but 2, allocate funding within certain government agencies to get research, R&D, and get corporations involved in this. So, that's what we need to help. We need to hold corporations, the government, everybody accountable. And what I advocated for is, on the federal level, you're impacting the state and city government. And a lot of people don't think about the city or state government as having as much power as the federal government, but yes, they do. All levels have a certain significance and importance with change, but with corporations, they have the power. Those who are leading, they have the power to lead the way. And I think a lot of them are starting to say, if we make this commitment and we have 100 clients, then we get a chance to influence those clients as well. And so I think that's been the most significant change that I've actually seen, is regulatory ordinances, policy, but also the leaders in corporate America. They're making commitments, like I said, whether it's 1 or 2 or 10, some of them are saying, we're just going to focus on this for the next 2 years, this specific topic, which I think is great, because you have to start somewhere. Don't claim something or say that, oh, we believe in sustainability if you really don't. Say, we're going to work on this, and this is how we're going to do it, because it's all in how you want to project to the world of being a trusted source or a trusted brand. Yeah.
Well, no, I think you're making a great point about businesses, whether they're large global giants or whether they're neighborhood based and community based, have a bias toward action, and they don't have to wait for there to be consensus in highly polarized policy environments where there's disagreement. They can move forward and start doing things. And so that is a source of a reason to be optimistic that if we can get a critical mass of businesses committed to this, that is a way of really creating change. So I think that's really a great point. The other thing I'm curious about is, as I move throughout the business world, a topic that I hear about that seems to be the number one concern in many ways of companies is the talent shortage and being able to attract and retain the right talent. Are you seeing companies making the connection between having a real commitment to sustainability as improving the odds that they're going to be able to attract the talent that they want?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And what's fascinating, Terry, is you're seeing like most of these prestigious institutions. You used to see like sustainability programs and recruiting and career pathways with like the Ivies or these little private schools. But now you're seeing it all across the country, where the engineering pools, the scientists, the research, the environmental law programs, it's phenomenal. And I'm excited mostly about that because 10, 12 years ago, when I started getting out on the road and speaking with different departments at different like colleges and universities. But I love this question because that's part of the change, like that a lot of these corporations, like you said, they are starting to look at, okay, we need to bring in a sustainability expert in-house, but we also, some of them have the budget to create a sustainable department, right, within certain corporations. But then some of them are like, let's do kind of this like amalgamation. Let's take, let's mix it up, and let's work with some consultants. Let's call up Deloitte or, the local consultant in the community and get their insight on how do we grow internally, but then making that connection. So I think the talent pool around the country, and I've had a lot of parents who show up at these talks and conferences thanking me because I'm getting their children and these young students, or they're stepping out into corporate America, and I want them to understand that interdisciplinary is a beautiful thing. I didn't have that in my undergrad. I didn't have an opportunity to. You could focus on law and get your MBA, but now you could pretty much craft and create whatever degree program and play a role in climate change all at the same time. But I think corporations now, they're really looking at, if we're going to commit to this, let's first start in-house internally and think about how to get our staff trained. It's one thing for the executives to have professional development and training, but it's another thing to get staff and everybody within the corporation. And again, it's planning. You can't do everything overnight. So it's like, even if you want your company to obtain certain goals within this, it starts at home in the corporation first, and then bring in the experts and those who can help you build that process out. And I think the talent pool, sure, we're seeing that, with the pandemic, that it's just been difficult to keep certain people on board. But I also think with that, innovation and opportunities are coming as well for others. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And that actually is kind of a good segue. I know that you've been involved in science education, and that's one of your passions. Tell us about that a little bit. I mean, what are you seeing? Are you seeing more young people getting interested in this field?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I just love the youth and, young students who are figuring their path out, because normally when I have an opportunity to speak to them, it's to inspire them and to get them to see themselves playing a role in the climate resilient movement. And so whether I'm invited to a law school or ethics or biology, my goal when I'm there for that 45 minutes or an hour speaking to them is to say, who are you, and what do you see? Like, what's in your vision? And then you get a few people who share with you what they think. But then I paint a picture, a vision for them, and I'm like, you're the leader. You have to start thinking that way and knowing that you are the change. Because I'm out here working every day to convince those who are my peers and who are older than me, but you actually can practice this and begin to see yourself running a sustainable company one day. And so with K through 12, it's fascinating because more and more you can see it's culturally embedded in who they are. And so our goal as curriculum developers is to get, even if it's economics, social studies, whatever the topic is to integrate climate involved in their activities and getting them to understand. Because I think if they understand this culturally and they're growing and getting older with having a clear understanding of what climate change is, they will become more in tune and aligned with how their careers, actually tie in, and transferable skills. And I'm not just talking about the students who are going to go to the 4-year schools. I talk to trades and everybody to say, hey, listen, professional development, as well as looking at engineering, and whatever those trades and workshops are, let's integrate climate into that. So education is one of the fun, commitments that I have around awareness, because schools and students, they really are starting to see, how they can play a role in this. It's not, when you go to law school, it's not just about getting the law degree and practicing law. It's really about you understanding, what are you going to do with that degree beyond your career. And business is the same way. I love the Urbancity. I was on a call with MSU and U of M before we had the interview, and I'm bringing together different areas of focuses from both universities so we can get more students and schools involved in this process. Yeah.
So Pashon, before we wrap up today, what are a couple of the key things that you want people listening to this to take away? How can we do more? What are your thoughts for us?
Sure. I always, Terry, try to get I'm always at planning or attempting to get corporations to do audits with their resources and their day-to-day operations if they haven't done that. And usually people get scared of that word audit, but it has nothing in the beginning to do with the accounting. It's more so to get to understand your inefficiencies and what you're doing on a day-to-day within your operations, to understand it more. Because that's an important step before taking on the commitments of the UN Sustainability Development Goals or corporate social responsibility. There's a bridge. There's some things that actually have to happen pre-commitment. And so in order to have great results, you have to strategize and figure out, where are you landing with all this? But that applies to households and residents as well. Those of us who are individuals, I'm like, what are you spending on a weekly basis on food? What's in your refrigerator? What are you throwing away? It's just important to do these assessments, and it's okay if you're terrible at it and you're like, oh, we waste, if you're a corporation and it's like you're feeding thousands of people and you're like, we waste 100 chickens or 3,000 tons of bread, and oh, this is bad. It's okay, because you can put a plan in place to address that. If you're a household and you never composted before, the first step is doing an audit and understanding who you are, what you're doing, how far do you travel in your car, can you walk to the store, can you ride your bike, what are some things that you can do differently? For me, it's like thinking about who you are, and again, these low-hanging fruit, easy things that you can do to activate your advocacy and your awareness. But the last thing is just constantly reading, just educating yourself on what climate change is and making a commitment to learning about a couple of things. Who's doing what in your community to address this issue? Because if you can't do something right away, investing that $25 or $100 to that organization that is actually addressing the issue, that's change as well. But if you can educate yourself and your families and your friends, and when you're having dinner, bring a certain topic around, like, oh, did you know that, this corporation is investing in, sustainability, or they're building an environmental portfolio, or what can we do as a family or friends or network to address these issues, So I think that's important, is investing our time, not just our money, but our time, in every way. All of it is invaluable. Yeah.
And what can we do to support Detroit Dirt?
There's so much, but yeah, so we have a 501c3 Detroit Dirt Foundation, and we have, obviously we take donations, but I'm interested in, any help that we can possibly, that anyone wants to extend to us. So it's like, we look at volunteering from a corporation standpoint, those who like to lend their intelligence and advice, that's important. Donations are important. But I think help and support it's a huge spectrum. So we accept it all. We accept the advice, we accept, those who want to volunteer. And we actually have a purchase agreement with the city. So officially, we are going to be reopening, and we hope it's going to happen, relaunch this summer. But yeah, funding is just the key. It's huge, and I don't always like to talk about that all the time with people, but investment in funding and grants, that's what we're going to need for research as well as helping us scale. Yeah. But I can be found, Terry, at Pashon Murray on Instagram, Pashon Murray on Facebook, at Detroit Dirt. on those platforms as well. So if people want to read, we're going to relaunch this at the end of the summer and start sharing information about what we're doing as well. So, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much, Pashon, for taking some time, to dial into this conversation today. It's just, you are an inspiration, and we have a lot to learn from your experience. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for inviting me. And anything I can do to help, just reach out. And we appreciate any opportunities to share the story and share information more than anything, but inspiration. We're just as inspired by this opportunity as you are. So thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to The Green Stream, powered by Sustainable Business Network Detroit. And remember to subscribe, to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcast. And stay tuned, because there's a lot more great conversations coming your way.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, The Green Stream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.